Thank you so much, Lori, and thank you again for the invitation. So just to clarify, I appreciate the accolades, but I'm not the chief medical officer anymore.
Oh,
And the reason that is because, and I'll give you a little background story, because a few years ago, we were hoping to move close to my family in New York City, which is where I'm usually from. And then we're down there, so I gave up the spot and moved down there. Was kind of working in the Harvard healthcare system. And then after a year of the pandemic, we came home. Okay. And you heard the word home because we felt Maine was really where we are at and where the home is and where people are checking on us. And I want you to remember that piece because that actually is the important message I want to drive home, so to speak, as we talk about, what happened to Lewiston and also how that's going to help us get resilient. And I appreciate the other description. And usually people don't know what a disaster psychiatrist is. They just say, "Oh, Tony, it's a disaster," but that's not the case. So it's actually increasingly a field where we have greater emphasis on looking at handling trauma from a community event, but not only at an individual level, but also at a community level, which is exactly, I think, what we as a community need to look at community options the same way. And as we approach how to deal with those things, it can't be just say, put more psychiatrists, put more therapists. There's a different way to looking at this. So, okay. So unfortunately, for years, we've been talking about these incidents, with Columbine, Sandy Hook, the Amish shooting, and then Virginia Tech. And we talked about it, and there's a sense that we hope it never happens here in Maine. Well, unfortunately, a few weeks ago, that shattered. It happened here at home. In fact, it was really quite shocking in the sense because just a week earlier, people were talking about, I guess there was media coverage that talked about how safe Maine is and so forth. So this really kind of came in the heels of that. But again, it really hit home. And I want to kind of share a couple of quick facts. First of all, everyone who sees a disaster is touched by it. And I see that means so many things. It's not the people who experience it, but basically anyone who experienced it, either through hearing from family members, hearing about being part of the community, you're touched by it. And Maine is a small state. So people look at the map, Lewiston's here, Bangor is here, so, oh, you got 2 hour difference, no big deal. It is a big deal, Maine. Because actually we do have people from Prescott with relatives down here and everything's connected, which is something that people don't appreciate so much far away. So everyone's really touched by it. And even some of the events like 9/11, when I was talking back when Laura was talking about that, I had people talking to me in here about this connection I had, this connection I had, this connection I have. I constantly hear those stories. And again, for us in Maine, this is a big deal. There's 2 types of trauma and disaster, as I mentioned. There's the individual trauma, which is historically where everyone focuses on, the PTSD and all the shock and all sorts of goes in there. But the important piece is also look at the collective trauma, this community, how they deal with it. And I think, it damages the bond, it's a damage the bond of social fabric. And a good example of this is COVID, okay? COVID really, you have some stresses in the community, stresses in cultures, and stresses in the population. But COVID really brought that out. And it's important for us as a community, so there's a way to either recognize it and deal with it and try to heal it, or perpetuate it, and then it can get worse. So I think it's important for us to do this, especially given the fact that, there's so many things that are popping up in events, whether it's, a particular group, let's say Muslims because of a terrorist attack, or COVID because of Asians. Now, this particular people worry about this, it's mentally ill, that's the issue. So I think it's important that we kind of work on that and keep an eye on it. So what I always want to emphasize to people, the intense reactions everyone goes through in a disaster is normal. You have an abnormal event that happened, and now you're just going through these intense emotions. And there's a tendency in the I guess altruism of all part, and people want to take care of everybody and also say, I need to do something for Lori. I need to do something for Jeff. I need to take in this. Sometimes the best thing is leave them be and let them heal on their own. Or let them guide you what they need to do. And I think sometimes that urgency to treat end up creating more problems, because I remember so many disasters. Volunteers who basically say, "Oh, this person has PTSD." Well, the plane crash has happened. They're of course really upset. You can't say that PTSD when there's certain criteria you need to have. So I think, but by doing that, you give that person a label, maybe he or she's gonna walk around with it. And that's just not fair to an individual. So extremely important that we recognize that some of these reactions are intense and is expected. Now, the big thing you want to look out for, of course, is how they don't impair the functioning. So as much as some of these folks have these intense reactions, many of them can still function and do what they need to do. It's the ones who, can, let's basically become suicidal, can't even do anything to take care of themselves and family. Those are maybe individuals that you want to kind of maybe keep an eye on and do more to help them out and stuff. But for the most part, folks are able to go through this. The other thing too about disaster is not just the event itself, but usually it's the ripple effects that goes with it. Disaster response, disaster relief, the lack of information, all those things add up to the stress of the individual. It was, and again, it's even in your patient experience, looking at a patient that's coming into the ED. Okay, if the experience in ED was because the guy had a broken leg and was in pain, and everyone came to boom, 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 boom. He is maybe just remember the fact that he had that break and stuff, but he also will remember a great experience because everyone went to help him. But if he said to wait 3 hours to see someone, and then the staff saying like, you gotta wait, I can too busy to deal with you. The bad customer service, it's a loud ED. He or she's gonna remember those things more so than the actual injury. Same thing with disaster survivors. Yes, there's a horrific stuff, but all the chaos that can happen afterwards can increase the stress they go through. Now, sadly, as a country, we have had enough times where we had to implement processes and services to help individuals after mass shooting. So in this particular case, I know people coming in from the feds say to support them, great. And I think that really mitigate a lot of things. But again, there's still going to be this subtle piece. Now that everyone's left, who's going to be paying attention, helping them navigate the process? That could be stressful. And then also people in general don't like to see government health services, and especially Maine, where we're really kind of we can do this. Remainers, people may want to keep this to themselves. It's remind me of a story with one of my doctor friends from Vermont, where a farmer had actually an injury where his arm got stated, arm injury. But in his stoic Vermont self, he went to ED, drove himself to ED, and said, "Here, can you help me with it?" It's that kind of do yourself mentality some people have, and it's important that we recognize that could be a strength, but also could be a challenge. Disaster pyramids often want to show people is that everyone focused on the top pyramid, the disaster victims, the people who were impacted by the event. But as you can tell, and it's quite all experience with most of the many other disasters, it's really everybody else in the community, the family, friends, just medical care workers, and then the public at large. And as I said, in this small state, almost everyone is impacted by it because they could be somewhere below that pyramid. So it's important that whatever we think about in terms of interventions, resilience efforts, and stuff like that, it has to be community at large and not just on the 18 families who suffer losses and things. Just real quick stuff about potential issues you see in mass shooting. There's of course the event itself with the death and injuries that happen. There's also relationship dynamics, gain and losses and gain. And by what I mean by that is, any Army veterans here? Any done experience? So if you ever listen to Army veterans, their experience is so compacted in a small time, especially when they serve active duty, that the unit becomes very tight. Even though they may have been served for, let's say, 6 months, but 6 months in firefights all day long, they can be pretty close to their people in the unit. Same thing in a disaster environment where people are forced into this really intense environment to either help each other, whatever it is. And then at the end of that time, whether it's 2 weeks, 3, depending on the interaction, you suddenly say, you're on your own. So if Lori was helping for 2 weeks and suddenly, goodbye, Lori, you're done. There's going to be a relationship disruption. And that's where some people may find the stress on that, because in this moment of need, I needed Lori, she was there, but now you're taking that away. So it's kind of important to think that. And this is also especially true with larger events, like Katrina was another one. When you have people displaced, they move to a shelter, they stay in a shelter for months, and suddenly say, okay, you do better, you're moving on. And people said, I just lost my house, and at 6 months we developed relationships, and now you told me to uplift again. So it's really traumatic in that sense. And there's a uniqueness and isolation. I feel like no one can understand me except the people who went through this. And that's a challenge that a lot of folks have in disaster situations where it's like a meeting, like people was like, well, if you never drank, how would you understand what I'm going through? And I think it's important that we recognize there's a uniqueness to this. And we need to appreciate that. Then there's also other things such as financial loss, job loss. I mean, for example, Lewiston, I know businesses and other places disrupted many days, and even businesses are still disrupted from it. So over time, that's going to have a ripple effect. Also, there's a lot of stuff that goes through in terms of post-incident after the experience. The more important thing is the anniversary. So after any major events, especially mass shooting, that first year is where people really kind of learn how to heal again. And when you get to that anniversary, is when you have that almost like I got that 1 year to start processing things. So we're right now, it's only a month out, it gives me that. So, and we just finished the funerals like a week ago, about a week ago. So I think it's still very fresh, but I think it's extremely important that we be available for people to process and have these anniversaries. So whether it's the community itself, or even making sure our members, I'm not staff, the community officers have the opportunity to share with the community the grief and process it. It's not just to say, well, it's just a community issue and nothing else. Other long-term toll could be social function impairment. People, slowly unable to have relationships or talk to people, trust, quality of life can be impacted. People's job productivity could be impacted as well. And then you can also have health problems related to distress. So as you know, a lot of psychiatric patients, so to speak, don't display overt psychiatric symptoms, but they may come to you and say, hey, you know what, I'm having a lot of headaches. My stomach is really bugging me. So they may have increased access to services, medical services, because one, that's how they're processing the psychiatric distress, or some culture, I mean, especially in Lewiston area where you have so many people of different cultures, that may be the more acceptable way to do this. So an important thing to maybe observe is maybe in 6 months, a year time, are we seeing a higher incidence of people coming in complaining of sleep issues? Or if it is there a correlation to this? And we need to figure that out. Now, not to say you dismiss them and say, oh, it's all psychiatric and you got to deal with it. I think you still need to address that, but there's a way you can work in an integrated manner with psychiatry to help. And then you've got to be mindful of discrimination scapegoat. One of my concerns about this, and hope as we hear more, it's going to be able to get a better picture, is this guy supposedly has a psychiatric diagnosis. Are we going to be labeling every psychiatric patient as a potential risk of shooting? And I was very pleased to hear the Commissioner of Public Health made a statement on one of the news conferences that most psychiatric patients are indeed not violent, in fact, victims of violence. And I think that's important that mindful of that, continue that. Because again, I mean, all psych patients are already discriminated at so many levels that this is another thing they don't do. Now, who are the victims? I mean, I talked about people directly impacted. First, a couple other people, the first responders, healthcare workers, media is a big one. So the other day I did an interview, I talked to a reporter, and of course, we usually ask you the same questions and stuff like that. And then I asked him, you've been covering this for 2 weeks, right? They said, yeah, how are you dealing with it? And he just kind of just kept quiet for a second and said, I'm from Lewiston. It's not easy. And I think it's that piece that we forget that they are like us. They are part of the community, they're dealing with it as well too. Then there's the indirect exposure. Now, this has actually gotten a lot tougher in a way, because in the old days, and that's actually, well, I could say old days, it's 20 years ago. 9/11 happened, it was visual, televised, everybody watched it and everybody felt it, okay, in some sort of way. This one, people watching it, streaming it, watching it in Facebook, all kinds of stuff that's happening in real time. So the people affected, radius has gone tremendously bigger. So that means a lot more people are impacted by it, along with the fact that we also make people really go in the state. The other thing also important to think about, people tend to focus a lot on what the trauma did to the individual at this time, what happens to shooting. But majority of the problems we're going to be seeing are people who have pre-existing trauma who's been kind of awakened by the trauma of the shooting. And we have so many patients who've been seeing that basically said, Lewiston just tipped me over, push me over the iceberg. Tip of the iceberg, push me over. Because there was all this other stuff. I have a history of domestic violence, I was history of being, I was history of being, in combat. And with Lewiston, it just kind of got too much. So it's something to remember oftentimes that it's not new trauma medicine, but it's just something that's added on. And I'll show you that a little bit too in a second. This slide is really to highlight that in distress response reactions, disaster reaction, they usually fall into 5 categories: physical, emotional, cognitive, behavioral, spiritual. Some of the pretty obvious. Physical. So people have problems with sleep, people have giddiness, people have GI issues, headache, that kind of stuff. Emotional, sadness, anger, anxiety. Cognitive is the way they're looking at things. It's basically my process of focusing. I can't remember things as much. I can't prioritize things. Things seems to get more difficult for me to handle, especially work. Behavioral, could be more, arguments at home, not showing up for work, it's on time, not going to school, and the great suffering, that could be behavioral. And then spiritual. These events make us think, is there God? Why did this happen? And you may be a very strong believer, you may be wanting to dig deeper into your faith and do together, or you may feel a challenge and say, you know what, because of this incident, I'm not believing God anymore because of why would God do this? So these are struggles we all go through in our head all at the same time and at different degrees. And that's not just the people who experience, but all of us, even as providers and clinicians who go through this. We go through this with them as well too. Now, this is a quote called cyclical disaster model that's been proposed by Vibrant, Vibrant has been a major resource for disaster mental health. And they talk about the different phases, the anticipation, the impact, adaptation, well, the recovery phase. I'll talk a little bit about that a bit. But what I want to highlight is the green and the black, the foundation issues and the chronic stresses. So again, this is to reiterate the point. People do not walk into disasters and have effects from a blank slate. It's not like they have nothing and stop from there. They carry around with them a lot of stuff that they're dealing with, whether it's food insecurity, whether they can make their unemployment, whether they can feed the family, whether they can take care of themselves, health issues, a history of psychiatric illness, domestic violence, all these things come into play. These are their, pre luggage, if you want to call it that. They're coming into disasters that we have to be mindful of, because that's going to impact how they handle the disasters. Now, not to say that all of them are bad. I mean, I think some of those also can be a protective thing because they've learned to adapt themselves a little bit to deal with the trauma. So, and I think an important lesson for me was years ago when I was working in a community clinic, and we had a woman who basically came from El Salvador, and she's not to, I mean, the story is horrendous in terms of the trauma she went through and stuff like that, but yet she was healthier and maintain stability in her job compared to other people in the clinic. And again, she had a degree of resilience because she, not to say that she ignored everything and basically blocked everything out, she recognized, she talks about it, but she also had identified and repurposed herself in some sort of way. So, and because of that learning she did, she processed things a little differently. So I think it's important for us to recognize both good and bad of that situation. But again, having said that, people are going to be impacted by the event itself. Anticipation phase, I'm not going to go into because this is pretty much like you worry about the next event. Now, one thing I do want to highlight here, I'm going to show this in a second. Every time you do post-disaster stuff, you in essence do pre-disaster stuff in the next event. Unfortunately, we deal with all kinds of community trauma, whether it's something like mass violence, climate change related disasters or snowstorms. There's also, massive car accidents. I mean, there's tons of stuff that's over there that we need to be mindful of. And I think people need to think of it as a continuous event that we need to be prepared for. So as much as the anticipation, which for this event may quote unquote happen, but I wish it would never happen again, but that's something I can't guarantee won't happen again. And I think we need to be prepared for that. So how do you prepare community? How do you prepare individuals to learn to deal with those things? Now, there's a thing, what they call stress inoculation. So before you go into combat, you kind of tell people what to do and save them, kind of give them that protective factor. And a clear lesson, and actually this also comes into play with common day medical experiences, especially in this room. I was flying out of Dallas one time, and has anyone flew out of Dallas in the middle of summer? It's like almost like you're gonna see thunderstorm almost every single day. I'm sitting on the plane, I'm looking out the window, it's on like 12 o'clock, it's darker than this, and I'm saying, oh my gosh, are we really gonna take off on this? And then the pilot came on and says, I just want to let you know your safety is my utmost concern. However, we will be taking off. I'll tell you exactly what we're going to do. As soon as I take off, I'm going to climb really steep so you feel like you'll fall back on the plane, and then we'll make an immediate turn to the right very sharply so you feel like you're tilting over almost sideways. Because there's a hole in the clouds that I can break through that way. He tells you exactly what he was doing. When he took off, he did exactly that. The plane went this way, sideways like this. No one budged, and then it went through the hole, and then it was fine. So I think this is the piece that is important for us to learn for this anticipation phase. We're preparing people for the next event, educating them, but same thing, translate that to community events as well, community issues, and working in the ED as well. Impact. Well, what happened? The event happened, how we deal with it. It's an intense period that is extreme focus on survival, the food, water, shelter, basic stuff that people are looking at. People will be extremely wanting to help. This is the tough part too. There's an extreme altruism that comes up from everywhere, country, locally, that everyone wants to help themselves. And especially in Maine, do this just almost on a regular day. But this is much higher, and I think sometimes it's what they need. But the risk comes later, is the next phase when they basically all go home. So what happens to those folks then? So this is the adaptation phase. So there's some initial sense of altruism, and then the disappointment. And I tell you, no matter how well you prepare for it, you still feel a little funny when it happens. So I remember after these big disasters, people often say, hey, welcome heroes and all kinds of stuff. And suddenly one day it stops. And yes, you go back to doing what you're doing, but I wonder how to stop. Same thing with COVID right now. So remember the days when people ring the bells and say how great what heroes are? You don't hear that anymore. So, and not to say I want that constantly saying, hey, well done, well done. But it does make you think. So, and the growth recovery is basically marked by restoration of previous routines. And also you try to get back to normal. As time goes on, what happened in Lewiston is going to be kind of not high, but it's going to start dampening down a little bit. The filters out to everything that you do. It's not going to be as prominent in your presentation. It's not going to be prominent in your thinking, but it will still be there as it kind of blends in with everything else. And then again, we just need to be mindful that people will have these flare-ups because of anniversaries, because of something that reminds them of the individual. What will happen if, let's say, something bad happens in Massachusetts with the mass shooting next month? Is that going to set off some, recurrence of stresses for these individuals? I mentioned this is cycle. Yeah, what you do pre-disaster, acute response, post-disaster is the same thing. Get ready for next events. Now, this is an important slide I want to emphasize. So much of the research, much of the emphasis has been on the PTSD, the depression, everything else that goes in there. And people spend tons of money, on research, on service issues, and things like that. But what the Institute of Medicine had identified is that there's actually a bigger issue, which is how people behave in a high-stress environment, or human behavior that got changed after an event. So people, as a way of dealing with the trauma, may be smoking more and drinking more. Well, that certainly they don't meet the criteria for PTSD, but you can be knowing, well, this is going to have an impact on the health of the person later on. So if you're a PCP office, that could be a question you want to ask over time if someone is going to be having, someone having suddenly an increase, I'm smoking 3 packs a day instead of 2 packs a day, okay? Is there a reason? Is there a correlation to Lewiston or anything that you've got to be mindful of? Changes in safety and travel. After you have a shooting, people may be anxious. For those who are shooting in the mall, people will be afraid to go to the mall for a while. So people may be afraid to do certain things because of that. People may be afraid to go out even after the first week. I mean, people are not really keen on going out because of that change in behavior. trick or treat in my neighborhood was absolutely down, down. I couldn't find any kids around. Events were canceled. People changed events. So again, it's something that we need to be mindful of. Is this going to impact how people seek care over time? They're diagnostic, they're not PTSD, but does that mean they're going to seek care more? So it's a way to, COVID was another good example, is where, people coming in now for every cold, but they're thinking they're COVID, and it's not. So that's because people are scared and whatever. Other stress behavior responses, people become impatient, people become irritable, impulsive, less able to prioritize. I mean, the typical example is as a high school student taking a final exam. They stress on final exam because they say, oh my gosh, I have like 5 things I got to study. I don't know what to do. But then you say, okay, out of those 5 things you study, which are the top subjects do you have the most trouble with, and which ones you don't have? That way you can figure out how you want to spread your energy to. People are struggling to try to prioritize it. Sometimes it's all we need to do is help them prioritize those things, and that may be the interventions you need to have. It's very concrete, basic goals that sometimes what people need to get from us. Shifting priorities, and of course, it may impact the healthcare and aid seeking over time. And these are things that can help modulate the response. Could be your experience of dealing with stress, perception of stress, okay? And also not perception of stress, but also perception of social support. So what they looked at, a lot of studies, a few studies, is that it's not the fact that something happened to me, but all of you in this room are there to support me. It's the fact that do I see all of you being there to support me? Because if I don't see all of you there, it doesn't matter how many. So I think this is an important thing that we have to talk, identify from our patients in the community, how they perceive stress and how they perceive the support. Past history is important, environment, support network. All those are pretty straightforward, but these reminders. Again, post-disaster stage, we talk about encourage people to go back to routine as much as possible. If you have, it's like when you fall off a bike, get back on it as quickly as you can, kind of thing. You want people to get back to it. The longer it is, the harder it is for them to get back. We need to strongly promote wellness. This is something we should do on a regular basis anyway, and I think we try to do more of it. But more so after an event like this, mass violence, where you really want to encourage people to seek wellness, encourage people to get care before it snowballs into something worse. And talk about advocacy and planning for future mental health responses. I do want to mention this. I mean, almost every talk you will have in terms of disaster mental health, it has to do with social media. People are using social media in a way that's, I don't know, some good, some bad, and some horrific. So they use it to seek information because they're yearning for information to make them feel better. But there's no guarantee that information is what's there. It's great to check in on this room. So if something bad happens, I'm going to text all of you say, using Facebook, say, are you okay? Are you okay? What's that, the Facebook safe feature saying I'm safe? That's a great feature. But beyond that, I'm start looking at all the news. It's out of hand because you don't know who to read. What's more important? People get upset because of the posts people put on those things. So they start posting stupid stuff in there, and then they get all upset and get fired up and say, I gotta say something back. And then this goes into back and forth, which never ends because you never win with it. Because they'll keep, saying all kinds of stuff, and you just have to respond. And that's why it's so important that we be mindful of this. And also, as much as we give information, we may need to be able to recognize who we give that information to in the sense of, it's not just as nice as posting something on Facebook or posting something on your social media page. Sometimes what another study has shown is it's important not only posting, but identify who your quote unquote social influencers are. So if you have, let's say, because the goal is you post something, you hope they share. And if I post something where you expect everyone to share, that's not the case. It would be these 3 people up front who are the social influencer who sends it out and people listen to the most. And they found this was suicide risk because they thought, with suicide, people get, worried because it's social, everyone, become contagion. No, what they found was it's not the fact that it became everybody gets access because it came from 3 people that everyone believed. So when we want to send messages out to support communities and stuff like that, that's something we may want to identify. There's certain community members that can get our message out better, and we'll believe them. Healthcare workers. I mean, and that's basically, the workers, we take care of social workers and wherever it may be, the healthcare force. We are very good at taking care of everybody else, but we just lousy at taking care of ourselves. My wife is a nurse, and she'll never listen to me talk about some things because and she's a nurse, and the same thing with my colleagues too. And I can guarantee it's the same thing when they tell me to do something. So it's extremely important that we take care of ourselves, especially in disasters like this, where everyone's out to take care of everybody, but someone got to take care of us. If we don't, there's a high rate of negative behavior. It can lead to burnout. And again, negative behavior, by the way, doesn't have to be someone acting poorly, someone acting, smoking more. It could be someone working. So you may think that, oh, Jeff is great because he's picking more shift. No, Jeff is stressed, and that's why he's coping with it by working. That is going to come at a cost. So we got to be mindful of that. Staff turnover, job performance, high rates of burnout. And this is important, especially for us as we help options, because one of the key thing about us doing a good job with our members is because we develop a relationship with our members. We know exactly what Bob needs when he calls and all kinds of stuff. When you have turnouts, you got to learn a new lesson again, which means it's going to increase your health costs because I don't know what to expect out of you. So that's why it really behooves us to take care of our providers as much as the people that they're taking care of. Other continued stress, job performance, turnover, I said that, disruption of staffing schedule. Staffing is very short in many places. So if you're one person called out, that's going to impact you quite a bit. So I think it's important that we be mindful. It's rather be proactively telling John to take off than John's only calling in to take off, because I can at least plan to have John cover John's shift. So I think it's important that we try to think about that. There's more negative interactions, and again, we talk about the great membership rating from if your provider force is not taken care of, I can't guarantee that rating is going to stay up there because they don't want to be calling and getting taken off the provider because no one talks to me, no one listens to me. So this is not a good service. So again, it's important that we take care of that. And then great stress on the supervisors. Other simple coping strategies, exercise, and work is good, but not too much of it. Seeking support from colleagues, spiritual care. I mean, all the stuff that we kind of do on a regular basis, but we just need a reminder to do that. Now, the good news, and I guess because of all the experience I've had dealing with different disasters and shootings, resilience is the norm. So we are going to get through. I mean, it's a human race. We got through disasters after disasters after disasters because we have become resilient. That road is going to be bumpy, but we can get there. It's Confucius. Our greatest glory is not in never failing, but in rising every time we fall. And as Nietzsche said, that which does not kill us can only make us stronger. So it's important that as a community that we develop, come together, and develop the resilience. And I have to say, one thing I constantly reminding folks, one thing I love about being in the state and being a citizen of the state is that we all come together, and this is what's going to get us through this. And I think if we can tap into the strength of Maine, and it's not like you're reinventing the wheel, you're just giving them more tools to do it and giving them ability. I think we'll be okay. I put this slide in there just because sometimes has anyone watched the show Nail? So my son loves it, and he's only 13. But the thing is, we may strive for the perfect cake, but sometimes we just need to make sure we have something in place for them and make sure we can take care of folks. Because if you and this is what I see some challenges, people strive for the perfect model, post-disaster model to take care of their communities, and they wait so long that it's almost like useless now. So it's important that we kind of think something that's close to it, and we can just constantly fixing it, constantly change it. It's always inform the people. And again, just a quick conclusion. What I gave you today is really a quick snapshot of what people experience in disasters. There's a lot more to talk about with each of those sections, but in the vast casualty events of disasters, they create a lot of intense reactions that are normal, but can be interrupted, interrupting your lives and disruptive in many ways, but yet we can provide them with support in the community. It's important that we take care of the providers who provide the support for them, because I think overall, with all those things in place, community resilience is usually the norm. And again, I have faith, and that's one thing that taught me, as much as I had to deal with these issues in the past, these disasters, I've seen community risen up, and I've seen communities do well, stronger. So I don't doubt Maine's going to be stronger because of what we do after that. So, with that, I kind of will conclude here and open for any questions.
All right, thanks for the insights and the descriptions. That was really to submit questions in the Q&A feature on the webinar. I would begin by asking anyone in the room if anybody has any specific questions for Dr. Ang about the presentation. And Heather, did any come through online?
It just started there.
Okay, that's fine. Well, I wanted to point out, it wasn't in your introduction, but I know you've been appointed to the governor's commission studying this event. And could you just give us a little?
I can't. We have. So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's, I mean,
Well, I will charge us later, so
Okay.
I can share that. But I think it's important that you're there on the table. So figure out what happened. It's I think folks need to know.
Yeah.
One thing actually before you to questions, one thing I want to emphasize. What I was presenting today is not a new thing I'm teaching people. I think what I want to encourage folks to do is you all do community health every single day, community mental health every single day. You do, and when these disasters happen, national people comes in, do the thing and disappear, but who left fixing it? Us. So you all have the skills and just really tap into your own expertise, and that's what's gonna be able to do this. It's not like you got to learn a brand new competency that you get a degree on. It's nothing like that. And I think if you fall back on what you do with the notion of, okay, I have this other thing to think about, what do I need to do different? That's what's going to be fun.
We had gotten earlier, and one of them, this is both forthcoming and a tradition with these horrible disasters, is the anniversary. You had mentioned that in your slides. And what do is that a healthy way and a meaningful way to remember these events, to have these, on anniversaries, to hold events, vigils,
Yeah.
etc.? Is that something that is this healthy for the direct victims, or?
It's actually many disasters, not just communities and stuff. The anniversary events actually is helpful because it gives some folks a degree of closure. I got that 1 year degree, I can now move on to those things. So, and it's also good to see 1 year I made it. It's like a marathon. It's like you got to that mile mark, wow, I made it. And I think this is what happens. I think this is important for people to share and experience. And again, this is something, as you get wider from Lewiston, people may remember differently a year from now in Prescott versus in Lewiston. But Lewiston certainly don't have their own anniversary and talk about it, we get that. But I think it's important to, for some reason that 1 year mark everyone talks about, and it's not just with this, but if you work with any patients who lost a loved one, that 1 year mark is always kept through, and then you got to remind them, hey, you made it through that 1 year. What do we do next year?
Yeah. About ALICE training.
Okay.
ALICE training. Can you explain what it is, and are you a proponent of it? Not sure what the questioners.
Yeah, ALICE.
I don't know either. I think it's an active shooter.
Oh, yeah.
It's a person school.
So that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So I think that those active shooter training, ALICE training has changed over time in terms of what to do with those scenarios. I think you need to do that. I mean, it's unfortunate events that we need to prepare for looking fire. My son does the shooter drills at school and things like that too. And it's unfortunate you gotta do that. And I know when I was Hartford, they even talk about before each presentation, they say, well, just wants to show, the exit is over here, where the chairs are, you need to defend yourself, this is what you gotta do. I mean, I know, it's like how,
Part of it,
part of that adaptability. Again, I think most places are gonna continue doing that, but again, I don't know how you can do, like, you can do Alice training all you want, but these happen in two places where there's no such trainings. So are you gonna start saying you're gonna train every, shopping center, every hall, every, bowling alley to a restaurant to do this? It's not feasible. I think a lot of it has to go over time in terms of, being vigilant, being one of the ones you can do. Again, the other thing too also is you need to not take the risk so far that you can't function. Because yes, it's unfortunate, we hear these events, and yes, it happened in Maine. But it's not happening constantly that I gotta be running around ducking behind buildings and all that stuff. It's like, same thing like when people get mugged. Okay, wow, really serious, there's mugging. How many muggings have you actually had in the neighborhood? So people need to be kind of mindful, think about that and balance it. I think and I mentioned about the distress behavior. I mean, people sadly avoid it because, and you saw that with COVID, people either eat or avoid traveling to Asia, or if you have any like terrorist man, I don't want to go fly because of the airport. But over time, people kind of learn to adapt certain things to new technology. No different from, when plane first came out, you have to learn how to just manage a plane and how to deal with the news system.
So, without getting into a lot of details, there's a question here about what the community could have done or could do to help prevent this event. And, from what you know, and not getting into blame or the perpetrator specific psychiatric treatment, et cetera, how can just community, neighbors, lay people, what can you do to help prevent a scenario like this?
I mean, again, not knowing all the full details, I mean, like, so many things go in place, and every shooting is different, unfortunately. So you can't say what happened here is not, what happened in Texas may not may happen here the same way. I mean, I just don't know. I think, it's important that we look at these events and find out, what happened. Usually it's not just the shooting itself. Usually something in the community structure have not been, fully utilized, or is missing, or whatever. But no matter what you're Virginia Tech, Uvalde, Amish school shooting, whatever it is. I think these are things that we need to address because we know we have so many holes in our healthcare system. Okay, and this is unfortunately one of those Swiss cheese that everyone just went straight through and something happened. And it's like any single day when you do, in hospitals, you do these, risk reporting and, risk assessment. It's usually happened because all Swiss cheese came through and something happened. And similar to this, there's not one thing that happened. So I think, I don't want to say, I don't think people should jump at it because if we had done this, this would have stopped. If we had done this, this would have stopped.
Yeah. I mean, when it resonated, your description of Maine is a really close community. I think we consider ourselves, community oriented, but we're also sort of the stoic Yankees with good fences make good neighbors. So we can be our own worst enemies at times. Yeah. A question about the definition of a disaster in general, in these phases. There's a lot of slow motion disasters, and it's the whole frog boiling scenario. How do we engage ourselves meaningfully in those disasters where there's not the direct impact, but there's a huge impact. It's ongoing. Mental health, for example, domestic violence, etc. It's not one impactful event. Is there a prescription there?
Well, it's hard because, one of the things is, I don't know if everyone ever seen that photo. There's an old photo that's lying around. I used to teach, but I don't have it today. It's a pregnant woman standing there complaining, with a cigarette in her hand, and the caption was complaining about the noise they're making on the street that will harm her fetus. So, and the whole notion of that is risk perception. Okay, when we don't perceive risk the same way or that intense, we don't respond accordingly. We better like if you tell me, Tony, your heart is gonna get a heart attack at some point. You keep doing, yeah, okay, whatever. I'll keep doing it, but I'll take my time. But the moment I have a heart attack, I'll become running to, cardiac surgeon, cardiologist and stuff like that. So I think it's the way we, as a, population handle what we perceive as threat. And that's been a challenging piece of medicine in general. Because ideally, we should spend all our focus on public health and preventing people from getting sick. Okay, and we know they're gonna get through it. People are gonna get sick, and it's not gonna put ourselves out of job. But I think if we do more of that, then we have a better use of our public health and health maintenance and so forth. But we are very whack-a-mole responding crisis process, and the thing in terms of these disasters is a similar thing. And no different from climate change we were talking about. So, okay, well, how can you get explain climate change when our temperature in Maine can change 34 degrees a day, and you talk about 1 degree difference, the ocean's gonna kill us. So people can't process it because it's not happening in front of them. And the sad thing about school shooting and any mass shooting is the fact that it happened in Kentucky, it happened in Virginia, it happened in Connecticut. Oh, finally it happened here. And that's when you feel the impact more so than anything else. And I think it's hard. And I think if I had the answer about disasters, that would be the same answer I would be teaching people about healthcare in general.
Yeah, that's right. So, questions about children. So special treatment, or consideration for children. What happens, particularly teens, what happens if your children won't engage? They won't talk about it, but you suspect they're affected.
Yeah.
Do you let them do their thing? How do we feel about that as parents?
Again, it depends on what age group they are in, because like teenagers, you don't go through the same way you do with a child.
You have a 13.
I have 13-year-old, so I don't know where he's at this point. But he's in this somewhere like limbo land, and I can't figure that one out. But I think the important thing is, one, let them take the lead a little bit. Sometimes we force things on them before they're ready, and I think that happens a lot because it says, remember that I said the notion that we like to take care of people, that we don't do good to take care of ourselves, because I know what's best for you, and you better do something about it. And by doing that, you force the issue when they're not ready to deal with it. And there's an old saying in an old discussion of philosophy in medicine. Do we come from a paternalistic way of doing medicine, or come from a collaborative way of doing medicine?
Mm-hmm.
So, Lori, I know what you need for medical care, and you should do this. Or, Lori, this is a problem. These are the options. What do we like to do about it? Which one do you think you're going to provide? I think probably the second. So now, not to say that you never do, depending on the age, obviously, but these kids, using the lucid because of teenagers, they have their own special resources. I think the biggest thing is allow them to say, it's okay for you to talk to us. Let us know what's going on. You don't feel there's no judgment because I know my son is like, he even told us. He said when this shooting happened, he and his friends were texting back and forth about what's going on and how they're feeling. That's their way of dealing with it because that's the age group. But he also felt comfortable telling, hey, Dad, that's gonna let you know this is what they talked about. This is why we're upset and things like that. That opens up communication because there's no judgment. He wasn't afraid that he's gonna have me yell at him and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know it's because I'm a psychiatrist. He knows that because he even said to Trump one time about something. He said, "Dad, we need to process this." I said, "Wait, I don't say this at the age." But again, I think giving that open invitation to have that discussion. And with younger kids, they may be even easier to play therapy. I mean, you can use it as a way to deal with it. Important discussion to have with school. People, I'm surprised but not surprised. There's still a lot of parents who are not that engaged with the teachers in school, so they don't know what's happening. They just know the good grades and that's it. But good grades doesn't tell you anything. So I think people need to be having the open conversation with teachers, even spiritual leaders if they're church going. It's an opportunity because sometimes it's like you need the formal way of having a conversation while the informal way. So it's almost like you may feel uncomfortable talking to me, but you feel very comfortable chatting with your aunt May.
Yeah.
Do that. I think it's just want to encourage people.
With the children.
Yeah.
It always feels like they come around faster, heal faster.
Yeah.
Physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
Children are pretty resilient.
Yeah.
And we sometimes don't give them credit for that.
Yeah.
Because of, again, I have to tell you, one of the experiences I noticed after many disasters, parents bring the kids to help and saying, you know, my kid needs help. And almost, I would say 50% plus is the parents who would help, but the kid was a proxy.
Yeah.
And you probably see this in pediatric office too. If the kid, you know, the kid is having cold, but after talking to them, the kid is not the issue, it's you. So I think it's important that we recognize that it's a family unit. And that the kid may have certain things, but the kid may also act out in because of the anxiety from the parents. And so we need to address if that's the case.
Yeah.
So.
Those are group custody. Yeah, it takes a village. Great. Did any?
We do, we have one question. Could you say more about stress inoculation and what are ways we can prepare in a healthy way?
Okay, so again, stress inoculation comes in different format. So like in the military, or like, you know, if you're deployed as a healthcare workers overseas, so they may say, Jeff, before you go, this is what you're gonna experience. That you'll be working in a camp where you're gonna be seeing people who are struggling with diseases, with suffering. How do you help yourself? These are things that you know what you're walking into, because you don't want to walk into something blind. That's when you get in trouble because you don't know what to do. So with individuals and families, one of the things you can talk to them, even not about the shooting per se, but okay, what would you identify as a stress for you? Okay, would you go into, let's say if you guys go into a mall, would you get upset by that? If they do, okay, what is it that you're gonna get upset? Talk to them before they actually go to the mall to start dealing with that, and start telling them, okay, this is how we're gonna prepare you for those things. Because it's certainly a whole lot easier to deal with it than after the fact, when they all stressed out from having panic attacks in the mall. If it's whatever you describe it. Same thing, one of the key things with emergency psychiatry that we do in the emergency room is we often treat patients with, suicidality, homicidality, whatever crisis, but the best thing to treat crisis is not at the emergency room. It's treated when you're calm and you can actually listen to what I have to say. And then I can explain to you what you need to do when the crisis does happen. And then you can set up layers. Okay, these are the first thing we'll do when this thing happens. I'm going to call my family members. If this doesn't work, I'm going to call the crisis line. And then this happens, kind of get to a point where they get to exercise some degree of autonomy and things.
Yeah. So let's wrap up with just one question about, the future here. And it was a question that was posed in advance about the idea, the concept of the new normal. And, should we look at this as we are in a new normal in terms of our vulnerability here in our community around these types of events? Or, was there never a normal before? Do we go back to normal? I mean,
What's normal? Like going back to 10 years ago, is that normal? I don't know. Normal to me is almost every single day. It's how things are going. I think one of the important things is looking at what's out there. Yes, this is one threat, but are there multiple threats that you got to deal with? Is there food insecurity issue that you got to deal with? Is there, unemployment issue you got to deal with? Because those may be more pressing. You can prepare all you want about mass shooting, but if you can't feed yourself, it's not going to be an issue dealing with that. So I think it's really kind of figuring out what to do with those things. Education is a piece of it. Again, I'm not here to propose yay or nay to gun regulations and all kinds of stuff, but it is something that we know as medical workers. There's a crisis in terms of people getting injuries from firearms, whether it's intentional or unintentional. So how do we mitigate that? Okay, you can say one thing, ban everything, but for example, we don't own guns ourselves, but I took my kid to have police arrange education for him to how to watch out for guns. What do you do? How do you maintain gun safety? You go to a friend's house. If their friend said, I know everything about guns, walk away, because no kids ever know everything about guns. That kind of stuff that you want to teach them basic information just to say, this is new normal. It's like cross the street differently because we have faster cars. There's just some things you gotta think about. So I really want to, and I don't want to have people walk away thinking the innocence is gone. The innocence is as much as you want to make of it, some sort of way. But things change. The new normal. For example, when we got iPhones, that was the new normal. But that's how we are. We with the law, so we just adapt to it, yeah, we adapt to it, so.
Well,
And basically, my one thing I said is that it's the adaptation, it's not going back, it's the adaptation that you choose from.
well, listen, I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
Really appreciate
Well,
again
thank you.
the insights
Yeah.
and the information descriptions were all very valuable. So with that, we'll wind it up here and Holly, are you gonna offer some concluding remarks?
I will. Indeed.
Great, thank you very much.